There are two things that will always make sense. Stay tuned and find out what they are. You know, when I was in seminary, I was a hospice chaplain. I served with patients who had 6 months or less to live. And I remember this one personable patient. He had a wife, he had kids, he had grandkids. He had just retired and they planned to spend their retirement traveling. And then he received his diagnosis. So instead of enjoying a hard-earned retirement, traveling around the country, he would live out his last few months confined to a hospital bed in his house. I remember leaving that home thinking, you know what, there are bad people in this city and they're going to live to a ripe old age, and yet this sweet patient will die early and never enjoy his retirement. This doesn't make sense. Well, I have the same feeling when I read 2 Kings chapter 5. The story, a lot of ways, just doesn't make sense. First of all, there's a slave girl, and yet she's showing compassion and care towards her captor. And then there's this ruthless king, and he's showing compassion and care towards a commander, sends him off for healing. And yet God's king over God's people and the servant of God's prophet, they both wind up self-centered, lacking compassion. And then the man in need of healing, Naaman, he's prideful and he's arrogant at first, but God still heals him. And the servant of God's prophet is the one who winds up with the leprosy. It just doesn't make sense. The people you would thought would be selfish are compassionate, and the people you thought would be compassionate are selfish. Naaman's healing came about because there were people in his life who were compassionate and cared for him, while the servant of the prophet's leprosy came about because of his greed and his lack of compassion. Care, compassion, those are two things that always make sense because they're akin to God's own heart, while selfishness and greed, on the other hand, are forces akin to the evil one. So, despite what others may assume about you, if they dug down to your core, would they find care and compassion for others? Or would they find selfishness and greed for yourself? Would they find the heart of God or the heart of the enemy? I'm going to leave you with that question this week, and we'll see you next week.